The draft is over, the stage is being torn down. That means you'll soon be on the clock in your IDP Superflex drafts. Hello, I'm Jeff Pomazal, host of the IDP After Show. Join me and Scott Soltis, Evan Ringler, and Eric Harms as we dive into a 4-round, 12-team IDP Superflex draft with IDP prospects, getting you ready for your drafts coming up later this year.
This is the IDP After Show.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you on this episode of the IDP After Show. Let's dive right into our draft. Eric, you have picks 1, 5, and 9. Evan, you have picks 2, 6, and 10. I have picks 3, 7, 11. And Scott, you have picks 4, 8, and 12. Eric, you are officially on the clock in this 12-team IDP Superflex mock draft.
Who gave this guy the first pick? First pick. I actually struggled with this a touch because I like a couple of players at the first pick. And you could go one of, I think, 3 ways in a Superflex. But I went with Ashton Genty, kind of the chalk pick there. And I'm going to let Evan take the other guy I was seriously considering.
Yeah, so I'll take Travis Hunter at 102. We don't have to talk about it too much. Incredible, elite, generational. All those things apply to him, and I think he's going to smash in fantasy.
Is there any concern, like with some formats where Hunter isn't getting that cornerback designation, where you'd kind of like maybe slide him down your draft boards a little bit? I know Sleeper has him listed as both wide receiver and corner, but I know in a couple leagues, like CBS leagues, only have him listed as a wide receiver. Does that kind of take any of the shine off of Travis Hunter as a prospect?
Personally, not much for me. Whether he's putting up 20 points per game at wide receiver or corner, I still really want that on my team. So as long as you're getting the points for the defensive scoring,
So he doesn't have to be the cornerback scoring wide receiver point for you, Evan. He can just be getting 20 points on your roster, however he's getting them.
That's fine with me.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. We'll let that one slide. I probably going to go against the whole Superflex mantra here of like have to go quarterback here. I'm actually going to go with Omarion Hampton, the running back for the Chargers. Like the dude was physically built in a lab for the running back position. He's 6 foot, 220 pounds. He had over 2,000 all-purpose yards last year at North Carolina. So like he can get it done on the ground, through the air. He's going to a Greg Roman offense that runs the ball a ton. So even if he's in a timeshare with Najee, like 50-50 to start the season, I can see that around playoff time in your fantasy playoffs where he's going to be kind of leading that maybe 60-40, 75-25 touch. And in it, like I said, in a Greg Roman offense, that is fantastic. We can be more efficient with our touches, and I'm just smashing Hampton wherever I can in these drafts. So.
Yeah, so even though this is Superflex, I'm going to let the quarterback slide continue. And, I got burned a couple of years ago taking Kenny Pickett in the first round. I took him later than this in the first round, but just because he was the best quarterback in that class, even though I wasn't super excited about him, I took him anyway. Should have traded back. There's no trade backs in this because I'm sure someone in the league would be just chomping at the bit to come get Ward now. But I'm going to go Ted McMillan. I think he has the upside. I think he's going to be on a team that might not be great for a couple of years, so they're going to have to pass the ball. And I think that, there's more value to extract there than necessarily the quarterback who I'm assuming is going to go here pretty soon since this is Superflex.
And Scott, you kind of brought it up with the whole part about like letting that quarterback slide. We're not talking about Shedeur Sanders slide here. We're talking about, the QB1 in this draft now available at the 5th pick in a Superflex draft. Is that indicative of his talent? Is that indicative of the talent in this draft at other positions? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have Ward as 7 overall in my Superflex combined rankings that we did as part of the IDP show draft kit. I just, the talent isn't there as strongly as it has been in the past. He's not being evaluated like a Caleb Williams was being evaluated, or even like a Jaden Daniels, or I think I've seen some people say that, he's being slotted in more like a Drake May. And Drake May had an awesome rookie year, but none of us were thinking about taking Drake May with a top 3, 4, even 5 pick in a lot of Superflex leagues. So he is the best bet to get a lot of quarterback snaps here in the immediate future and over the next couple of years, since he's going to have that 101 long leash. But I don't see it's a combination of me not seeing his talent on the same level as some past 101 quarterbacks, and the fact that I think there are still just some really good players out there that I have more confidence in their long-term fantasy success.
So it's funny you mentioned a couple players in last year's class, because the last year was like the class of quarterbacks. So Scott, here's a little activity for you. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Caleb Williams or Cam Ward?
Williams.
Jaden Daniels or Cam Ward?
Daniels. Even before a great rookie year, Daniels.
Drake May.
May.
JJ McCarthy.
McCarthy's better situation.
Penix.
Ward.
Okay, so if Ward would have been in last year's draft, he would have been your fifth quarterback.
If he would have been, so with the caveat that if he would have been in last year's draft and he would have been drafted by the Titans with the talent that they have, okay. Because some of this is me not, trying to use hindsight to say, oh, Daniels had a great year. Daniels had the rushing upside, which pushed him up draft boards before he played a single snap in the NFL. So I was trying to think about situations as well. And, going into the year, Penix was just in that weird spot because no one expected him there. I think that, his future is a little bit murkier than Ward, and he's not going to get as long of an opportunity necessarily, even though he was a first round pick that they spent a lot of capital on. So I think I have Ward. If I was doing a startup, I would have Ward and Penix very, very close in my dynasty QB rankings.
Perfect. And now welcome to the Quarterback After Show. All right, let's get this train back rolling. So we have the first four picks. We have Genty, Travis Hunter, Omari Hampton, and Tet McMillan. Eric, it is back to you. Who are you going to take with the fifth selection?
Well, now that we've poo-pooed Cam Ward, I'm going to take Cam Ward. I'll go with the quarterback in the Superflex. I agree with Scott. I would have had him after Drake May, I think, last year. If landing spot, independent of that, JJ McCarthy is definitely in a better situation, but I would have had him ahead of JJ McCarthy just as far as his talent. But I'll take him here. There's a lot of, I don't know, on the next several picks, it's kind of a big bunch of guys that are all kind of similar, different positions, but similar kind of talent level. I'll go to Cam Ward here and hope that they can build the team around him over the next couple of years, and he ends up being good.
That seems like pretty good value in a Superflex to get the QB1 in this draft at pick 5. So
right.
As much as we threw shade at him, I don't think that's a terrible spot to take him. He's going to have that security blanket, like Scott was saying about being the 101. He's going to have a long leash. They obviously invested a lot in him, and they were probably getting a lot of great offers on draft day. And still decided to go with their quarterback here with Cam Ward. So with that said, Evan, you are up with the 6. Who you got?
Yeah, I see a tier gap right after Ward goes. I have a big group after this, but I'm going to take Travion Henderson, who went to the Patriots in the early second round. Now, I don't think he's going to be a bell cow, probably at any point in his career, but he has the juice and the pass catching chops that we look for in fantasy that can lead to success without needing a huge workload.
I love the Henderson pick here, especially with his pass blocking ability. He's probably one of the best pass blocking running backs in this draft, and that's definitely going to keep him on the field. And so I love that pick, and I'm a little upset that you sniped me right now. I wanted to trade up and get him, but we'll let that one go. So I'm going to take his running back at Ohio State. Then if you take Travion Henderson, I'm going to go with little Quinshon Judkins right after him. Again, he's probably got that. I know the aura is out there about him being like a Nick Chubb 2.0 kind of thing. He's going to be a 2-down thumper. He probably lost a little bit of luster when Dylan Sampson got drafted a few rounds later. And I think that's probably the splitting factor for me between, if I have a choice between Henderson and Judkins, I'm going to take Henderson, but the consolation prize of Judkins is still probably pretty good. Again, he's a physical specimen. He runs hard. He had 2 great seasons at Ole Miss before he went to Ohio State. So he's definitely got the track record to do well there. So that's who I'm going to take at the 7th pick. That brings us up to number 8. Scott, that's you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. So I have Tyler Warren, even not in tight end premium, as my overall prospect 5. So I think that he is someone who could end up leading the team in targets in pretty short order. And so when I'm looking at some of the other guys I was looking at in terms of receivers, I don't see them to be in positions where they could possibly lead their team in targets or even be second on their team in targets anytime within the next year or two. Whereas Warren steps in. I know there's quarterback questions, but he has all the talent in the world and not a whole lot of competition for targets other than Michael Pittman and then the rotating cast of characters that they roll out there as wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. So I really like Tyler Warren in this spot, even in non-TE premium.
Scott, do you think the quarterback of the Colts is currently on the team when we fast forward next year to 2026 draft season?
No. I think he'll
No.
be getting a new quarterback, and he will be a phenomenal safety blanket for whoever that quarterback is, if it's a rookie, and just a great target if they bring in a veteran.
Okay. All right. That brings us up to pick 10. Is this you, Evan? Yeah?
No, it's pick
Pick
9.
9.
No, pick 9. Sorry. Yep. Pick 9.
Yeah. And I went with Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver, went to the Bucks. Kind of like Scott was just saying, he's not going to lead the team in targets this year and probably not next. Kind of depends on the health of Godwin, how long Evans stays with the team. I don't think they pick him in the first round if they didn't plan on playing him this year. So I think Jalen McMillan is not going to play near as much this year. And they can. The one curious thing is, are they going to put him in the slot and move Godwin outside, or are they going to put Emeka outside, which he can play? They both can play out there. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes this year. But I went with Emeka over a couple running backs, just the longevity of receivers in a dynasty. I'll go with the receiver here.
Eric, you really think that Egbuka was a first round pick because he was the best player on their board, or they're maybe worried about Godwin's injury?
I think probably a little bit of both. Yeah, I think there's got to be some concern there, but I guess we'll find out. It could be that he was up on their board and they know Evans isn't going to be around for much longer either. So I guess we'll see.
Okay. I like that pick. That's a solid pick, especially at the 10 spot or 9 spot. Sorry. Evan, you got the 10 spot.
Yep, and I feel pretty lucky to get RJ Harvey here. I have him at 7 in my personal rankings, so it's nice to grab him at value here. He got second round capital to a Sean Payton offense where there is very little competition. There's a couple role players, but that's it. And even before the process, I was in because of his strong combine performance, and he has some good analytics behind him as well. So grabbing him at 10 here, I'm pretty happy.
I like RJ Harvey a lot. He would have been my next pick, but it concerns me a little bit of his age. So if you're playing in maybe a contract league like RSO or something, I might have taken him over Emeka, where you've got 4-year contract for him. But this was on sleepers, so I went with the receiver. But I love Harvey in that situation. It's a great situation for him.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The age certainly does matter to some degree, but for me, the situation is a little bit more important to me.
And once again, following Evan in this draft is not the best place to be because he's 2 for 2 for sniping players on me. And so then I'm going to settle with the next player here. And so actually I'm going to pivot to Eric. Eric, what can you tell me about my pick, Mr. Caleb Johnson? And is this a good pick at 11?
I think it is. I've gotten him in a couple of drafts already. He went to a perfect situation in Pittsburgh. They run some outside zone. He excels at that. He's patient behind the line. He looks kind of slow at start because he is so patient, and he finds a hole and he goes. Not super fast, but he has good long speed. And so when you see him, and he has a good way of kind of, I don't want to say outrunning people, but being a little bit shifty in a way that he uses his speed so that he can get that corner or that edge. And people take bad angles on him all the time, whether he just kind of runs upright and looks slow or what. They just seem to always take bad angles on him. I think one thing that people are missing when they watch him is that he plays against stacked boxes all the time in college. He has a lot of runs for 0 or negative yards, but part of that is there's nowhere to run sometimes when you're playing against 7 or 8 in the box. Iowa had a horrible quarterback situation last couple of years. So I like him a lot.
Well, you made me feel really good about my pick there. So,
well, and did you hear what Tomlin said about him? That
yep,
they're talking about volume with him, so they're going to run him into the ground there.
Yep. And with their quarterback situation not really taken care of, he's used to not having a quarterback. He's already in the same color jersey as he was in college. So there's so many things that are the same. He's just used to that. And when was the last time Mike Tomlin had a running back by committee approach at the running back spot? Like, he has been bell cow guy, like for forever. It just seems like, and yeah, getting Caleb here at the 11 just seemed like a slam dunk for me. So
yeah, he didn't do a lot of catching of the ball. He could, mostly just on screens, not any kind of route running, or not much anyway. So I could see Warren getting some more of that work.
All right. Got the 12th pick. Scott, you are on the clock.
Since this is Superflex, I'm going to take a quarterback. I passed on Ward earlier, but give me Jackson Dart here. Another first-round quarterback. He at least has a premier target in Malik Neighbors. So once he gets the reins, it may be later this season. It may be next year at the latest. I don't see them, waiting for years patiently behind people like Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. So Dart's probably going to play later this year, worst case next year. Has at least one elite receiver to throw to. I think this is the perfect spot to be able to take him into Superflex.
All right, that's going to wrap up our first round. We had Genty, Hunter Hampton, McMillan Ward, Henderson Judkins, Tyler Warren, Emeka Ibuka, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, and Jackson Dart, which brings us back to Mr. Harms. You have the first pick in the second round.
I am going to break the IDP seal and go with Abdul Carter. I don't think I need to say anything about Abdul Carter. He's a beast. Maybe we let Scott talk about Abdul Carter a little bit. Just elite athleticism, was an off-ball linebacker. He's still kind of young in his edge. So you start adding more moves to that athleticism, and I don't know. I just think sky's the limit with him.
Couldn't agree more. Wore the 11 at Penn State like Micah Parsons. Has a lot of Parsons-like qualities because Parsons played off-ball linebacker when he first got to Penn State too, before we moved him over there. So very athletic. I've pined about him everywhere ad nauseum already. So I'll just say, great pick, Eric. I was really a little bit torn. If it wasn't Superflex, then he would have absolutely been a first-round talent for me. Superflex is the only spot where I move him down, and I moved him down to the 13th spot in my rankings. So I think this is a good call.
Yeah, great pick. And I think it's another tier gap right here. I wasn't quite sure who to take. I had several players grouped very closely, but I ended up going with Trey Harris, the Chargers wide receiver, second round capital on him. He is, on a per route basis, arguably the best receiver ever in college. Just ridiculous per route efficiency, although the sample is very small. But I am willing to take a chance on that upside because he's the type of player that Justin Herbert has never had, which is a true like downfield threat. That's basically Harris's whole game. And with Herbert's massive cannon of an arm, I think there's a lot of potential there in LA.
Can you catch the ball?
Yes. Better
Sign me up.
Better than QJ, that's for sure.
Well, again, I liked Harris a lot. I was hoping that he was going to slide here to the 14 to me, but I'm going to stick with another guy who can catch the ball. This is going to go to my boy Kyle Bellafield. This is for you, buddy. Matthew Golden, wide receiver for the Packers. I know that he is very similar to a lot of the Packers wide receivers they have right now. He's kind of in that same mold, but I think he is like clearly the best of what they have. The Packers haven't taken a first-round wide receiver since Reagan was in office, so clearly they have a plan. I do think that they're going to kind kind of scheme some throws his way. If you watched any of his college tape, everything looked like he was contested and like having defenders wrapped all around him. But the quarterback play in Texas last year kind of made that happen. Like he had to come back for balls and he had to slow down on routes. And hopefully Love is an upgrade for him at the quarterback position and he can really utilize his talents and his speed. Because, there was supposed to be another Texas wide receiver that came to the combine and was going to be the fastest one. But here we have Golden was the fastest one at the combine. So easy pick for me at the 14th spot. So,
and I'll continue the trend of NFC North receivers, but I'm going to show more love to the tight end spot. Colston Loveland was a top 10 pick. I know he's going to be in target competition up there in Chicago with the likes of Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. And I know they also brought in another wide receiver who I'm sure we'll be talking about at some point later in this draft. But the talent is absolutely there. I was surprised to see him go as the first tight end picked over Warren because I was higher on Warren pre-draft. But that doesn't change the fact that he is in a prime spot. You don't take a tight end in the top 10 to have them be a blocker, even though Loveland is a capable blocker. So I see arrow up for him with Caleb Williams long-term. I could see them having a very productive relationship.
I think that's a great pick. And as much as you alluded to the snap share, the target volume that he's probably going to get, like you said, the draft capital is there. And in that Ben Johnson offense, we've seen what he can do with a really athletic tight end. So kind of, like you said, wheels up for him there. So like that pick. Good value too here at like 15. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, I've got him all the way up at 8. I'm really high on him and just what he brings to the table beyond the draft capital. It's being tied to that quarterback in particular, and at least a little bit less murky because I don't see Cole Kmet taking the field too much and pushing Loveland out. I liked Kmet, but I think that experiment is pretty well done at this point.
Where do you have Warren if you have Loveland at like 8, you said in your rankings?
I've got Warren 5 and Loveland 8. And that probably doesn't change too much, even if it's tight end premium, because I think there are a couple of really good tight end targets here. The reason Warren's higher is because Warren is going to be higher in the pecking order for whoever the quarterback is. So that and the pre-draft talent evaluation was a little bit higher on Warren from the consensus of all the people who watch the tape and break down all the metrics. So Warren went into the draft with a little bit of an edge, similar enough draft capital and a little bit better landing spot, pushed him up there. But Loveland is someone who I would still be very happy to walk away with in my drafts.
Yeah, I see him,
especially here.
I see him pretty equal. I think Loveland really suffered from a horrible quarterback last year. And if you go back a year earlier in 23, he looked really good. So I think talent-wise, they're pretty close. So it'll be interesting to see what Loveland can do in Chicago.
Mr. Eric, you are on the clock after Colston Loveland is off the board.
Yeah, I was going to take him. I went with Jaden Higgins at the 2-5, Iowa State wide receiver, the hated rival of the Hawkeyes. He went to a good situation in Houston with a good quarterback situation. They actually, it's funny, they were comparing him to Nico Collins, similar big receiver, good with contested catch, real good hands, but he is also capable of the short and intermediate routes. So I think he'd be a good fit on the opposite side of Nico. And it'll be they've got kind of a full receiver room there, so it's going to be interesting how it all shakes out this year and next.
Yes, they do. They do have definitely a full room, especially with bringing in a fresh free agent, Christian Kirk, and then another guy who might show up on our draft here a little bit later, maybe a former teammate of his as well. So,
yeah, that's a great pick there, Eric. I'm going to go with Cam Scatabo here. He's a very well-rounded running back prospect, elite receiving profile, great tackle breaking profile too. He might not have the elite athleticism, but he has shown an ability to carry a high workload, which matters a lot. And I think he will be able to eat touches like that in the NFL, which is always valuable for fantasy.
are you at all concerned about Tracy's role? Are they going to split? How do you see that working out?
Yeah, I'm sure they will split. And I'm not really worried about it. I think Scatabo will take all of the receiving work for the most part because he is truly elite in that area, and probably the goal line work too because he's bigger than Tracy. So that's all of the high value touches really.
I like that pick. It made things a little bit easier for me with him off the board because now I'm gonna take a linebacker here. Probably not the linebacker everyone has consensus one, but I'm gonna go with Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker for the Browns here. Um, he basically was a first round pick in my opinion. He was the first pick on day 2. Um, JOK might be done in Cleveland. Kind of suffered a really severe neck injury last season. Teammate Jordan Hicks kind of said it was really scary and it's going to kind of go slow. And teammates just don't say those kind of things if there's nothing to kind of be concerned about. And Jordan Hicks has been around long enough to know he's entering his 11th season, so he's not just going to like say something off the hip just to get a soundbite. So he kind of knew what he was kind of talking about. He's got a great defensive line in front of him. He's got Myles Garrett. He's going to have Mason Graham playing in front of him. So those guys are going to take on double teams and kind of make things easier for him. And if you watch the college tape, he put up some great tackle efficiency for the Bruins last season. He was just like a tackle machine for him. So super smart dude, kind of worked his way onto the team, kind of what Cleveland's all about. So I kind of like that pick and the landing spot for him. So.
Yeah. So I have my fingers crossed that Caleb Williams is not only going to work out, but that he's going to throw 70 passes a game because my next pick is Luther Burden. I think the talent was there. I wish he would have landed somewhere else because DJ Moore is locked up for a while, and I hear a lot of comps of him to DJ Moore. They also have Roma Dunze, who I mentioned earlier. They just drafted Colston Loveland, who is also on my team. So this was just, to me, a matter of talent and being tied to what I think is going to be a really good quarterback. A lot of the wide receivers that I was considering along this same range may have had an easier path to snaps, but I was less convinced on the talent and them being able to sort of stick to it once they get a role and they get that opportunity. So this was a tough one for me. I know we've talked about tier breaks a couple of times, and once Higgins was gone, Higgins was sort of the last of a tier for me. So I wanted to stick at wide receiver, and Burden was the best player available for me at that position.
Yeah, and you sniped me again. I was going to take Burden there. I like the fit in a way that I think you can see him as the Amon-Ra type of fit for Chicago. So it could be a real good fit there. But like you said, it's a loaded receiver room. So It's going to be fun to watch. And the Bears have an offensive line this year, so he should have time to throw. And so since you took Burden, I went with Besh. And I love the landing spot. I kind of wish Burden would have went to the Raiders and flip-flop, but it's a great landing spot for Besh. I could see him being the number 2 receiver as soon as this year behind Bowers. He's got Jacoby Myers there, who is a good receiver too, but not spectacular. He's a real sure-handed receiver, good contested catch. Really like Besh here.
Yeah. I like Betch a lot before the draft. It's kind of weird with him and Jacoby Myers there and Brock Bowers for the most, because all 3 of them kind of work in the middle of the field. None of them are really outside guys, but I like all of them a lot. So kind of tricky there. Here at 210, I am going to take Tyler Shuck, quarterback for the Saints. There's a decent chance that he's going to be starting games this year. And regardless, that top 40 draft capital tells me that he is going to be given a legitimate chance to start at some point, which is very valuable in a Superflex league. I also think that there is a little bit of upside despite him being 35 years old approximately. He has all the traits that you look for in like a highly regarded prospect. He's got the size, he's got the arm strength, he's got some mobility to him as well. I'm not really expecting the upside outcome, but I do see it a little bit. And then bottom line, starting quarterback in a Superflex league.
the 35-year-old comment from the youngest guy in the room. Perfect. So
He is older than me,
Evan,
which is saying
well,
something.
that doesn't take a lot right now. That doesn't take a lot. Evan, do you ever draft here? Like this is a good example. Here we're at the 210. Do you ever take a player like Shuck with the intention of flipping him because he's going to be a starting quarterback in a Superflex league and thinking you can like return on investment and maybe get a late first or something later on like that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the best arguments for taking quarterbacks in Superflex drafts is just the value retention. They are basically given a free pass for their first year and maintain value almost every time. Like even Bryce Young's horrific rookie year, he was still worth a first after that. And Tyler Shuck, not to that degree, but if he doesn't play at all this year, he will likely still be worth a second next year. So it gives you kind of a safe floor, it gives you outs over the next year.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I think that strategy is not only smart for quarterbacks and Superflex, but just offensive weapons in general. When we think about regular one quarterback leagues, someone like Cam Scattaboo can end up blowing up this year. And if he does that, he'd be someone who I'd be looking to move shortly thereafter. A lot of these guys that have either contested rooms or had question marks coming into the draft about talent level and things like that. If you have a boom running back or a boom wide receiver, it's not always the hardest thing in the world to flip them. In one of my main dynasty leagues, I had Brian Thomas Jr. It paid off great for me to have him, but I needed running back help, and I was able to flip Thomas for Bijan Robinson, and I have the 104 in that league, and it's a 2-copy league. So now I'm going to have Bijan and Travis Hunter as sort of my cornerstone in that league because when IDP have that boom rookie year, Jared Verse, is maybe going for a second in most leagues now, but you have a Scatabo who hits, or you have Jack Besh who hits, or a Tyler Slough in a Superflex league. They would be really easy flips because you're always going to have teammates that are league mates that are starved for offense.
And what you said, Evan, and what you said, Scott, is perfect because you guys just made this pick seem so much smarter. I'm going to go with the quarterback for the Seahawks, Jalen Milroe. He got top 100 draft capital, which is pretty solid. He went to a team where the quarterback in front of him, Sam Darnold, might be seeing ghosts at some point with that offensive line that they have in Seattle. And if that happens, what better way to avoid seeing ghosts than put a quarterback out there that can run 4-4? So, at this point in the draft, end of the second round, I'm trying to hit a home run here, and if Milroe hits, like he can be the next cheat code. He can be like, I'm not going to put him in that tier of throwing like with Lamar, but like he could be like a Jalen Hurts light. He could sneak into the back end of that QB1 conversation, and if you're getting him in the end of the second round, like you guys said, he's going to retain value, and at worst, I got a second next year out of him. So.
Yeah, and the thing with that profile is if he starts any games at all, you can project him as a top 6 option at the position. Mm-hmm. Even when Justin Fields has played horribly in the league, he's still been a top 6 quarterback basically every time.
Just that floor is so high, right? Mm-hmm. With the rushing upside and everything. Is that what you're alluding to, Evan?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
As a Seahawks fan, are you happy with Milroe on?
I am. I'm kind of all in right now. I know that he can't throw the ball, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to watch it.
Just what you want, a quarterback that can't throw the ball, right?
I mean, it's kind of like taking Anthony Richardson in the 3rd round. That sounds pretty good to me.
All right, Scott, close up our second round here with your pick.
Yeah, as much as I've enjoyed the QB After Show, let's bring it back to the IDP After Show. I'm going to take Jihad Campbell. I have him as my best linebacker available. I understand that Schlesinger has that path to snaps more steadily because there's so much open competition there. But you don't invest as much as they invested in Campbell to not have him on the field. I hate this for Nakobe Dean. This wasn't a team that I thought was LB needy, but the Eagles are really good at drafting highly talented players and then getting a lot out of them. They still have some questions at edge, and Campbell has been shown to be a more than competent pass rusher. So I could see them manufacturing ways to keep him on the field even after Dean comes back if they want to work him in more. So he is my number 2 overall IDP, and he's someone who I am more than happy to get at the very end of the second round.
So you would have taken Campbell over Schlesinger?
Yeah, I am lower on Schlesinger. I'm not going to have any copies of him. Let's just say that. I think he is a good talent, but I think this edge class has a lot of very high upside plays, and I would rather take 2 or 3 shots at edge compared to what I would have to spend to take 1 shot on Schlesinger.
All right. So in our second round, we had our IDP players go off the board. We had 3 of them selected. Is this kind of the general trend you guys are seeing in drafts right now, that drafts that you're in for your dynasty leagues, where there's not that really emphasis or focus on the IDP players at this point? It's kind of chalky where these are the 3 names going off the board here.
Yeah, definitely. From what I've seen, maybe even sometimes only 2 going in the second round, and either Schlesinger or Campbell slip into the third. So IDP's definitely getting pushed down this year some.
I have seen Carter creep up into the mid to late first in big play scoring leagues, but yeah, for the most part, it's just these 3 guys that I've seen go in the second, with a couple exceptions. But yeah, this is pretty standard.
Is Scott in that league where Campbell went or Carter went early?
Most of my rookie drafts are kicking off this week, so we take a little bit of time to breathe afterwards. But I think there's a few mitigating factors that are going to push him higher in my leagues. One, I play in a lot of 11-11 leagues where you start 11 offense, 11 IDP. I also play in a lot of 5-position leagues where you have to start linebackers, edges, defensive tackles, corners, and safeties, and no one has dual designations. So that makes linebackers a more scarce position than it is when you have guys with dual designations. So I think that'll push the linebackers up. I think the fact that it's edges in some of those leagues and not defensive tackles and defensive ends that are together as defensive linemen is going to push Carter up a little bit in some of those leagues. So those may be a bit of an anomaly compared to some others, but I suspect Carter is going to go either mid-late first, very early second at the latest. And I think both of the linebackers are going to end up going in the second in a lot of those leagues where there's good linebacker scarcity. In my sleeper leagues, I think the way this board is shaking out is going to be very similar to how it shakes out in those.
Perfect. Good stuff. All right, we're going to start the third round. We're going to try to go through a little quicker here with the third and fourth round, just so we get some questions and things here at the end. So, Eric, you have the 301, sir.
All right. I took Kyle Williams, the wide receiver, went to New England. He's 4.4 speed, can play X receiver there for them. He's got a good release, so I think that's going to pair up well there in New England.
Yeah, especially after last year's disappointment with Baker and Polk. They just didn't turn out like New England was hoping for, so maybe Kyle Williams is the answer. So,
yeah, love that pick. At 302, I'm going to go Bashal Tutin to the Jags. Incredibly explosive running back prospect, and he lands in a situation that's ambiguous. This is Liam Cohen's first draft, James Gladstone's first draft, and he was all on the Tutin train. So I think that there are some narratives there to, potentially see a lot of upside for Tutin if he was to get into that Liam Cohen scheme, which has been very fruitful to running backs.
Yeah, and I was definitely going to be in on Tutin here at the 303, but once again, sniped. Not bitter about it at all. So then I went with the receiver we kind of mentioned a little earlier. I went Jalen Noel here for the Texans. I think he's very different what they have right now. They have Nico Collins and Nico Collins 2.0 on the outside. And I think in a year, Noel's going to be that sneaky underneath play, that kind of the short yardage guy that they don't have a tight end for right now in Houston. And I just think he's going to have a really good path to snaps once Kirk kind of moves on. He's already in his 8th year, which I was kind of surprised with. I didn't think he was in the league that long. So,
Yeah, they still have Tank Dell battling through his injury, but Noel's like a bigger, stronger Tank Dell type player, so I think he's going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a full leg tattoo, so that's part of it too. So.
All right, so
Scotty,
I'm realizing in real time that I have a type. So in IDP, I sort of broke in by really showing a lot of love to the overlooked big guys on the defense with my DT streaming articles and just pumping up DTs. On offense, I guess I've got a soft spot for tight ends because I'm taking my third already in Mason Taylor. I like Taylor pre-draft as, in this range of how they slot in. I think there's a little bit of ambiguity for who would be that third or fourth or fifth best fantasy tight end after Warren and Loveland. But Taylor landed in just a perfect spot with the Jets, where it is Garrett Wilson and apparently Mason Taylor to catch passes. So he might be the number 2 pass catching option in his rookie year. And so that's just a great spot for me to continue to hammer the tight ends.
You hammering the tight ends is something I didn't have on my bingo card tonight, Scott. So you just keep that one to yourself. So speaking of tight ends, Eric, you are up. Wait, that didn't come out right.
I'm going to take over the tight end mantle, I guess, here going forward, and I'm take Terrence Ferguson at the 3-5. I really like the situation there with the Rams. I think he fits in really well, and I'm excited to see what he does. They've got Vontae Adams and Puka, of course, but I think he takes over for Higbee sooner than later.
Yeah, that's an awesome pick. I love it. Higbee's maybe got 1 year left in him. And Ferguson's a elite tester at the combine too. So, yeah, I love that. I'm going to take Jadon Blue at 306, Cowboys running back. He has kind of a Tony Pollard light skill set, a good receiving back, undersized, not the best rusher, but he lands in a situation that is very ambiguous, just Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, really. I expect him to get a decent opportunity there. And if he seizes it, he could actually, be an RB2 or better in fantasy. Maybe not better, but RB2 in fantasy.
Yeah. So
speaking of
oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, this is the spot in drafts where I'm starting to pivot more towards IDP. And there's a lot of first round IDP draft picks that are still here in the third round of the drafts that I have been doing so far. And so my pick here is Walker out of Atlanta. I know he had played some off-ball linebacker. I know he had played some defensive end in college. I think that both of those can be very productive positions from an IDP standpoint. And the Falcons clearly have more need at edge than they do at that off-ball linebacker. But I think they're going to find ways to keep him on the field. They drafted him ahead of their other first-round pick that they gave up a king's ransom to get. So I'm sure both of them will be on the field plenty, and I'm very high on each. I have them just one spot apart in my combined rankings that I've done. So I would very much like to get some shares of Jalen Walker in case he turns into what I hope he can be.
And not since the Minnesota Vikings missed their pick in the draft, we had a team jump up in front and draft in front of another team. So,
Scott,
yeah, that one off the yeah, it's okay.
You know what? I would have taken him ahead of your guy. That's what. Yeah, that's what it was. It was like, come on, man. Let's get to the good thing.
We're gonna travel back in time to the 307. I'm gonna quickly take Devin Neal here before someone else comes up and snipes him. He had a really good pre-draft workout. He tested really well. He could have probably went in the third round, didn't slip to the 6th, but I think he landed in a really ideal spot. Kamara's in his 8th year. He's already age 29. He'll be 30 by the end of the season. He only really has to beat out a CEH and a Kendry Miller to be the RB2 there. And, we've seen crazier things happen. New coaching staff. So this is maybe their guy, kind of like a Tootin pick where they're kind of staking claim to this is our guy, this is our pick. So after Devin Neal, how about a little Jalen Walker action? And then now, Eric, you are up.
I like tight ends, and I cannot lie. I went with Elijah Arroyo at 3-9, and it's kind of a pick your tight end round in the third round. Lots of options. Arroyo's uber athletic. Had he tested, he probably would have tested the top in the class. Did get a lot of his yards on like seam routes, longer routes, had a real high ADOT, but it's going to be fun to see what he can do with McDonald's offense there in Seattle. What do you think of him, Evan?
I think he's really interesting as a prospect because you have an extremely high ADOT, but also an extremely high yak ability. After the catch, he's one of the best tight ends in football last year. So clearly he's got crazy explosiveness and he can get downfield, but you can also get him the ball underneath and let him run after the catch. So I really like it from an analytical point of view. And then with my next pick, my 310, I'm going to go with Woody Marks, who is another great pass catching running back that lands in Houston, which is a soon to be ambiguous situation, I think, as Mixon really didn't play well at all last year. And he is not a weapon at all in the passing game. He's capable, but Woody Marks is a much better weapon. And I expect him to seize that role immediately this year with a little bit of upside for more in what should be a good offense.
I like that pick. I'm going to stick with the running backs here. Just some really good players who are like an injury away from being like league winners at the end of the season. I'm with DJ Giddens, running back for the Colts. Again, he's got Khalil Herbert just to kind of beat out for backup duties behind Jonathan Taylor, who has shown he can get injured and miss some games. So getting a running back with like literally league winning upside here in the end of the third round, sign me up for that one as well. So I'm going to go with that. Scott, you are on the clock.
I am going to stick with my Atlanta Falcons edge rushers and take James Pierce Jr. here. All the talent in the world. We'll see if he can put it together and shake off some of the coachability concerns that folks have. But I think that the talent is there. The draft capital is definitely there. Not only a first round pick, but one they traded a significant amount to get. So this goes to the point I was making a little bit earlier, where I would rather have Walker and Pierce than Schlesinger. And I think in most leagues, you could probably flip 2.7 for 3.8 and 312. So give me two bites at the edge apple over Schlesinger, and this is that final piece of that puzzle for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's a league that wouldn't accept that offer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great point, Scott. All right, so in that round, that was our third round. We had two defensive players going. They both just happened to play defensive line for the Falcons. They were both taken by Scott. And we had a lot of Eric's tight end in that round. So bringing up our fourth round here, Eric, you get to start off the fourth and final round for us tonight. Who you got?
A tight end. Harold Fannin Jr., Bowling Green, Ohio, not Kentucky. He just incredible production at Bowling Green. Got a bet on it, and Njoku has one more year left in Cleveland. Hopefully Fannin takes over next year and he's not the next Kincaid.
Yeah, and you should be able to learn some stuff from Njoku. Hopefully they're kind of similar types of players. So yeah, pretty good landing spot there. 402, I'm finally going to dip into the IDP waters and take my boy Nick Emanwari for my Seattle Seahawks. The most athletic defensive back in the history of the NFL, which is pretty cool. And now he's, going to Cam Chancellor's former stomping grounds. Of course, there's some relations there. But also it's just the Mike McDonald defense. He's been looking for a big chess piece that he can move around like that. I think Emanwari can play in the box. He'll probably play in the slot a little bit and rush the passer. Kind of a jack of all trades, and yeah, should be very productive for IDP, I think. Although he is pretty raw, so it could take some time.
Evan, hypothetically speaking, let's say a fantasy team has, say, Julian Love and Nick Emanwari on their roster right now. Who are you going to play this year? Who are you going to keep?
Emanwari, just because he has more of that box upside that I look for, as opposed to Julian Love, who is primarily a deep safety.
I'm going to stick in the NFC West here, and I'm going to also take a IDP player at this part. I'm going to go with a little Nicholas Martin, linebacker for the 49ers. Dre Greenlaw is in Denver. Next to Fred Warner, there really is a hodgepodge of who could be the guy. Martin got some surprisingly good draft capital in the draft, so I think that kind of surprised some folks. So I'm gonna take a stab here in the 4th round with a player who could potentially be, Dre Greenlaw's running mate, and we've seen that defense be able to support 2 high-end linebackers from season to season. So why not us?
So I've got some IDP ranked ahead of this next player, but I feel like I'm getting a little imbalanced and a little heavy on the IDP. So I'm going to take a quick break to take Jalen Royals, wide receiver for Kansas City. Kansas City is seemingly still and perpetually looking for 1 or 2 wide receivers that they can consistently throw the ball to. And so a 6th round running back can end up leading their running back in touches. Why can't a guy like Royals, who has talent and was a top 10 ranked wide receiver coming into the draft, find some ways to get onto the field? And, all it takes is a little bit of a click with Mahomes, and suddenly he's a target machine. So I know there's a few guys ahead of him, but I'm not really all that scared of Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice and everything they have there. So I would like to get a little piece of Jalen Royals just in case he ends up being that guy.
Andy Reid always has a way too of getting his playmakers the ball, and if he drafted Royals, there's a reason he's already got some plays cooked up for him. So.
Okay, and while we're throwing darts at wide receivers, I took Pat Bryant at the 405. I'm sorry. I just lost my train of thought. Yeah. Peyton called him Michael Thomas, or said he reminded him of Michael Thomas, and he backed that up by drafting him in the 3rd round. So not a real impressive wide receiver room there in Denver, so might as well see if Peyton ends up being right.
Yeah, he's kind of that big slot archetype that Peyton loves, and they don't really have anyone to fill that role other than Devon Vele, who, as a 2nd-year player, I believe is 28 years old. So yeah, he has a real chance to produce there.
And the ageism is real tonight.
Age hating.
Imagine being 28. Oh, geez. Just ancient.
I'm almost double that.
You don't look it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. At the 406, I'm going to go with Dylan Sampson. He was, as a prospect, regarded higher than many of the running backs we've taken before him, and was actually drafted higher than a lot of them too in the NFL draft. But the landing spot wasn't ideal, as Cleveland, pretty bad offense, and Judkins landed there around pick 40. But I think there is still some upside. He has more speed than Judkins, so there could be a role there. I don't know if he's necessarily an elite pass catcher, but he's capable. And yeah, I'll just take the shot that there's a chance he could outproduce Judkins even. Maybe he's better. Who knows?
We've seen stranger things happen, especially when teams double dip at the position.
Yep.
So earlier, Evan and Scott, you guys both made a case for quarterbacks retaining value, and I'm going to double down here on this one. I'm going to go with Will Howard, the quarterback for the Steelers here. He did just enough to win the national championship at Ohio State. He's in the 4th round right here, so he doesn't have to do a lot to retain value or even increase value. Right now, the Steelers currently have on roster Mason and Rudolph. I don't know. He's probably played for the Steelers once or twice before. We saw how that went. I know there's a lot of Aaron Rodgers rumors about him signing there, but that hasn't, until we see pen to paper, there's a real world where I could get a starting quarterback in Will Howard here in the 4th round in a Superflex league. So, Scott, you mentioned earlier about throwing darts and hitting home runs. This might be the spot where you take a player like this who's got a chance to really return on value. So,
and he has the experience. So he played well at Ohio State. He's shown that he can run it, and not run it, but he can run an offense. And he's definitely got the weapons now with Pickens and Metcalf. And can't forget about Big Freiermuth. So, yeah, I like Howard, and all it takes is one good season. You'll find some Yinzer out there who's more than happy to trade to get their quarterback. And sorry, in case you know, from Pittsburgh area, Yinzers or Steelers fans, maybe a little bit of local parlance there, but I'm going to go back into the IDP well. My next best available offensive player is 47 overall on my big board. Mykel Williams is number 24. He has first round draft capital. I know he's a better run defender than pass rusher, and I absolutely get that. But all it takes is a quarterback just running for his life from Nick Bosa on the other side and into the waiting arms of Mykel Williams for him to just luck into at least a handful of sacks, in addition to what seems like a tackle floor. And he is a prospect who can develop more of that still. The Niners clearly thought very highly of him given where they took him. So he's going to get playing time. I like him more as a football player than an IDP prospect, but he's still someone who I'm very happy to get at this stage of the game.
Very solid pick. All right, we each got one pick left. Eric, who you got?
I went with Torrey Holton, wide receiver, Seattle. Somebody has to play the X there. And Torrey Horton's a big receiver, 6'2", about 200 pounds. And I think he could be the X. All he's got to do is beat out MVS, and we've seen what he can do. He has his moments, but I'm taking Torrey Horton here in hopes that he can surpass MVS.
Yeah, good pick. Definitely has some upside in Seattle there. I have several running backs, I guess 4 total running backs that I'm still quite interested in here. Taj Brooks, Ollie Gordon, Jordan James, but I'm going to go with Brashard Smith, who went in the 7th round to the Chiefs. Now, I've called a couple other guys elite pass catchers. He is like the elite of the elite. Just one of the best pass catching running backs that we've seen in years as far as prospects go. And now he lands in a good offense and, again, an ambiguous running back room where Pacheco was horrible last year, although injured. Kareem Hunt, he's over the hill. And, Carson Steele, guys like that. I'm not worried about that. I'll bet on Smith's talent. I think he can get on the field at least as a pass catcher.
Is he a former wide receiver? Is he the one that was a former wide receiver? Yeah. I thought he was. Yeah. I'm going to stick with the running backs here. Kyren Williams is asking for big money, and the Rams have shown time and time again that that's not what they're going to do. They're going to move on from those players and get those cheap contracts. So I'm going to go with Jarquez Hunter here. Just as a late round dart throw in the end of the 4th round, I could potentially get an RB1 next year. If Kyren Williams moves on, McVay knows how to run an offense. He knows how to get the best out of his players. And, Hunter had a really good college tape. And at this point in the draft, I think I can do worse for a pick than taking a potential running back there. So I know they have Quorum from last year, but he was kind of dinged up and didn't really show a lot. So, maybe the coaching staff is ready to move on or move over a little bit anyway. So last pick of the draft here, Scott.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that you could do worse than with your last pick, I'll take the number 4 overall pick in the NFL draft, Mason Graham. He's going to be on the field. I know he doesn't have as sexy of a profile as like a Jalen Carter coming out of college in terms of the pass rush metrics and production, but he is just an overall incredibly solid player on a team that needs interior defensive line play. So I could easily see him being one of those linemen that is hard to get off the field and has that, 70, 80% snap share, which is really ideal for a defensive tackle, in part because of just the overall talent. He doesn't have a glaring weakness anywhere that I've seen in his game, and the draft capital and the need that they have. So Mason Graham going to get tons of snaps, tons of opportunities to make plays. So hopefully he makes at least some of them here as my Mr. Irrelevant for this draft.
So you kind of mentioned Mr. Irrelevant here, Scott, at the end of our 4th round. And if we would have gone all night, I think, if we would have kept drafting. Who's a player that you are kind of surprised right now that's still available or still able to draft? Or who would maybe be the first pick in the 5th round for you?
Oh, me. Sorry. I wasn't
Yeah,
sure
sorry.
if the general you or you're coming back to me. So it would be Malachi Starks for the Ravens safety. I actually have Emanwari ahead of Starks, but by exactly one spot. So especially if I was in a spot where I needed defensive back help or safety help for those 5 position leagues, Starks is one of my next best players available and has less question marks in terms of opportunity and shares and things. So I think Starks had the first round draft capital as well. Give me all these first round IDP that are going to have 4 or 5 years to show what they have.
It's such a Ravens pick too, just taking a player like that right at the end of the first round every year. So
Mm-hmm.
Eric, same question to you. Who's a player that would be your next pick in the 5th round, or you're kind of surprised it's still on the board here?
I think I would go with Ezraku, edge player. That's who I'd pick next. I think he's in a good position there in Dallas, being opposite of Micah Parsons. And as we talked about, Williams earlier could do some cleanup there on the Cowboys.
Yeah,
Somewhere
I
Mike
think.
Woollard is smiling.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. I had Ezraku next up, and I guess also the running backs I mentioned earlier, like Taj Brooks and Ollie Gordon and Jordan James, and then also Derek Harmon, who is one of my favorite prospects in this draft. I've seen him go much earlier than this in D tackle premium leagues, which I play a lot in, but that's pretty nerdy.
Eric, if there are any takeaways from this draft in particular, or like just kind of your general takeaways from drafts in general that you've seen so far, what's kind of the general consensus on this year's draft as far as a plan, strategy, or kind of takeaway?
It's kind of following the same in all of my drafts that I've been in. First round is kind of choose your running back, who's your favorite. Second round is pick your favorite receiver. Third round's pick your favorite tight end of the second tier tight ends, obviously with other players sprinkled in there, but it's kind of the way it's been going and what I've seen. Sprinkle in your IDP, solid players in there that are going to start right away. Fourth round is depending on your philosophy of dart throws at players you think are offensive players you think are in good positions to succeed, or solid defensive players that are going to start, if not be starters on your fantasy team year one, wait a year or two and they will be. So it's kind of the way I've been seeing it play out.
Scott, question to you is who's a player that maybe not necessarily in this draft because we only did 4 rounds, but who's a player that you want to walk away with every draft with on your roster this season?
So for me, it is Noel Williams, the corner in Kansas City. He got decent draft capital, I believe, 3rd round. But the reason I'm excited about him as a corner, and I'm not an advocate of drafting corner very often, but I have been at times with guys like Marcus Jones, who played both sides of the ball, and I walked away with in every single one of my IDP drafts in his rookie year. Williams is an outside corner. He hasn't really played much slot corner, but he was a phenomenal kick returner for Cal. And Kansas City doesn't have a clear kick returner in place. And so I see him, if you're in a league with kick return yards, which all of mine are, because those yards matter too. They're yards on the football field. He is just a great prospect, probably a Keyshawn Nixon light, since he's not expected to be in the slot, doesn't have as much of the occasional sack upside that a guy like Nixon would have, but will have that kick return upside. Likely, keep an eye on the Kansas City depth charts because, the running back we were mentioning earlier, Smith, has some kick return experience as well. But given the change in the rule to promote more kickoff returns, I could see that being a pretty profitable spot. And he's one of the rare, if only, IDP this year that has that kind of upside attached to him. So I'm walking away with him in my last pick of every draft until people start to do the same. And then he'll be my next to last pick in every draft.
Evan, last question to you before we kind of wrap up. Toughest question of the night. Who is your favorite pick in the draft, whether it's a player that you selected or somebody else based on value or just that you feel you got sniped and should have taken him earlier?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm actually just going to totally cheat at this and give you one for each of us. Uh, for me, it was getting Bashal Tootin in the third round. I thought that was awesome.